We just have 3 more MLTs for the hand. Can I get you? Yes, thank you. So the first one we're going to do is MLT for lumbricals. So what's the muscle action of your lumbricals?
Flexion.
Flexion what? Yes. So you're really cool lumbrical grip.
Incredible job.
So to do an MLT of your lumbricals, you want to do the opposite. So I'm actually going to have my patient scoot forward. I guess you can kind of see that. So wrist is going to be neutral. You can have it up like this, whichever is easier for you, or you can just have it neutral on supported on the table. But what I'm going to start with is flexing, having my patient flex all of her fingers, right? And then technically you're going to have to measure each one of these individually because your lumbricals are individual. But then the next thing you're going to do is go into MCP extension. So then I'm going to measure that first MCP extension. I don't know if you can see it a little bit better if I have her hand up like this. PIP, DIP, all the way flexed. Keeping that wrist in neutral pronation supination. Bringing her MCP back into extension until I feel that first muscle resistance. And then if I have you back here, you can probably feel a little bit of a stretch. And then I'm going to measure that MCP extension. So you can use this. Some of you I saw even have that little nubby goniometer. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where it's like short? No, it's short. It's kind of all one size. It looks like this one, but short.
Oh.
Does anyone know which one I'm talking about?
Yes. Don't have it right now. I don't.
Does anyone have that one? I thought I saw somebody. Anyway. Yes. Yeah. Can I use that? Yes. So does everyone see?
Oh my gosh, it's so little.
This little nubby goni? It works exactly like this one, just shorter arms, so that you can get to the fingers. So this one, you can measure the dorsal surface of each finger. Axis is going to be MCP joint. Stationary arm is going to be along whichever carpal you're along. So in this instance, I'm going to be along the second metacarpal, and moving arm is going to be along that second proximal phalanx. And I feel your resistance there, and I'm getting 7 degrees of MCP extension for her second digit, and then you can go along and do each one. I'm getting 3 degrees at the third MCP joint. There's a confused look. What?
I'm just trying to see what you're measuring.
So I'm measuring, her fingers are staying flexed, her PIPs and DIPs are staying flexed. I'm pushing each finger back into MCP extension. Does everyone understand that?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you happen to pull this one on the practical, we'll just tell you to do an MLT for the second lumbrical. We're not going to ask you to do all 4, or we'll say third, fourth, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Good? Okay, so that is, I don't know who this was. Sorry. So that is lumbrical MLT. The next one we have, I'm going to have you face this way. So turn your body and chair. I'm going to use this arm. Is Extensor Digitorum, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, you guys have to go. I'm not thinking of. Oh, I do have the list here. Okay. Finger extensor muscle group. So your Extensor Digitorum. You want. The patients are supine for this one.
That might be what the book.
So the book says
but
supine. If they're seated, we'll be okay with that. Yes. Okay. So patient is seated or supine. In your book, patient is supine. But you want the elbow extended. So same thing like you were doing with some of your other ones. Put that elbow on a towel roll to make sure you get full elbow extension. The one thing I will say, we're not going to be as super sticklery, I don't know, with draping if your patient is wearing a t-shirt. So, patients, be kind to your lab partners when we meet next time, and if everyone wears a t-shirt, then you won't have to worry about draping because we're doing everything from the elbow down, everything should be exposed. But if your patient / lab partner shows up in a shirt like this, you are going to have to ask them to remove it and you are going to have to drape. Does that make sense to everybody? So this is not how I want my patient. I want from mid humerus down exposed. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, so extensor digitorum. What does extensor digitorum do? What else? You're doing it. Wrist extension. Digit extension. So remember when you're doing MLTs, you kind of have to wind it up to the last motion it does. So I'm going to want my elbow extended. I'm actually going to raise this up a little bit. Okay, there. Elbow extended, and I'm going to have wrist pronated or supinated. It's your extensor digitorum, so I want to, if I'm doing an MLT for extensor digitorum, do I want
Pronated.
I'm gonna have them pronated again, stabilize like we were doing before, stabilize so that you're not bringing her into shoulder internal rotation, stabilize, you're gonna pronate. What's next? Do I need to do any radial or ulnar deviation?
No.
There's two ways that you can do this, and I'll explain both ways. The first is, then what was the next thing you guys said that it does at the wrist?
Extension. Does wrist extension.
It does wrist extension, so then I need to
Flex.
flex it. And again, moving my hand down. And then what does it do?
It
Extends the
digit,
fingers. So then I would have to, relax. I would have to flex all the way and then try and measure that little bit of IP flexion, right? So that gets, you can do that and that's perfectly acceptable. That might even be the way they show you in the book. Or you can flex the fingers, have them make a fist. And then the last motion I could do is my wrist extension. So then relax, stop helping me.
Sorry.
Breathe, patient, breathe.
I'm forgetting.
Hold that, and then I want you to hold that. There you go. And then I'm feeling my first muscle resistance there. I can take my goni. You can do this either where you're using the lunate, the third metacarpal, and along that midline of the forearm, or you can do the ulnar styloid along the fifth metacarpal, along the ulnar aspect of along the ulna, sorry. And I'm gonna be measuring it at 64 degrees. So that's extensor digitorum. There's the two ways. Like I said, you could do all the wrist flexion, then come in there and measure your IP flexion, or flex all those fingers, flex the wrist last. So with most MLTs, there's probably more than one way you can measure it. Be consistent, explain why you're doing it that way, and make sure that you're actually measuring the joint you're moving last. So if I flex the wrist and then flex the fingers, and then I measure the wrist, is that gonna be correct?
No.
So, and explain that to us, okay? So then the finger flexors. We have flexor digitorum superficialis. That's the one we're gonna worry about. So am I gonna have my forearm flexor extended? Am I gonna have my elbow flexor extended? Sorry. Am I gonna have my forearm pronated or supinated? She cheated. She is showing you what to do.
Sorry.
And then this one the book might show you two ways. So I'll show you the other ways. Stabilizing at the humerus, supinating, moving down, pushing into wrist extension. And then this one, the way in the book, I think they tell you to bring, nope, stop helping. They tell you to bring the MCP into extension and then you measure PIP flexion. And I think that's the only way the book shows you. Or does it show you finger extension and then measuring MCP.
Flexor Digitorum
I have to remember that.
reported maximum amount of wrist extension. So the book just does them together,
Okay.
and it looks like you're just keeping everything extended.
And then measuring wrist
And
extension.
you're doing wrist
Okay.
extension.
So those are the two ways, just like with the extensor. So you can either extend the wrist, extend the MCP, and then measure how much flexion is at that PIP. That way it can get a little bit confusing. You have to move your hands a little bit more, or keeping the IPs and your MCPs in extension, stabilizing and moving into wrist extension until that first relax and stop helping me.
It just happens, I'm sorry.
Until you're feeling that first muscle resistance. And then again, depending on what side that you're sitting on or sitting compared to your patient, since I'm on this side, I'm gonna do the measurement along the volar aspect of her wrist, where the lunate should be, up along that midline and along that third metacarpal. Or if I'm sitting on this side of my patient, I can use that ulnar styloid, come up along the ulna, along that fifth metacarpal. Clear as mud on those? Yes. Do you want to practice those, or do you want to do?
Yeah.
Okay.